Hey, thanks for joining us for another dive in. We have finished our series through the book of 1 Peter, and so now we are taking a break for 2 weeks before we start the book of Psalms. So during this 2-week break, last Sunday and this coming Sunday, that I wanted to talk to you from, what the Bible would call the 5 books of wisdom, or the 5 literature pieces of wisdom. And so those books are, including the book of Psalms, they are Proverbs, which we talked about from this past Sunday, the book of Ecclesiastes, which we'll talk about for a moment today together. The book of Ecclesiastes is one of those books where, it's like John Calvin would have put it, that he refused to preach from it because he says it makes very little sense, but it's so powerful for you and I. The book of Job, which we're going to talk about this coming Sunday, and also the Song of Solomon. And so in looking at those 5 books called simply wisdom literature, it prepares us, it gets us ready for the book of Psalms, which will start not this Sunday, but the Sunday after that. And I'm excited about having the opportunity, along with our preaching team, to lead you through a study over the next, many months together as we touch on Psalms together. But today I wanted to talk to you from the book of Ecclesiastes for a moment. And so we ended our study Sunday morning with this text from Ecclesiastes chapter 9 and verse 18. And it does prepare us for Psalms. It says in Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 18, wisdom is better than weapons of war, it says. And that does make a great deal of sense for us. But one sinner destroys much good. And so what he says is this. He's saying that there are moments in our lives that we can't just discount. Because as we talked about Sunday morning, there are going to be those times in our lives when we have disruption or interruption. And God does work in those moments of our life. Sometimes we feel like when our life has been interrupted, that somehow God has removed himself from that moment of our life. It's called, it's a theological term called Deism. Deism is that God has come, he has redeemed us, but yet then he removes his presence and he watches us work our way through life. Completely opposite of what Scripture tells us. But we can't discount these moments when our life does not go the way we want it to go, that we have these moments where we say, I'm smarter than God, I know better than God, or I can just take things into my own hands. That's exactly what the writer is talking about. Let me read it to you again. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. And then I went to chapter 10, verse 1. It says, dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. And I think sometimes in those moments where we think that we have more wisdom in God, we have more insight than God does into our future, that we just we discount those as being human. And I agree, we're human, and we do have those moments. I have them, you'll have them as you traverse through life. But yet there is an effect on our lives. There are those moments that do have consequences at time in our lives. And so we can't just discount them. There are moments when we say, in our life that we know better than God, or we're smarter than God is, or those moments where we understand a circumstance, and what God is saying is that a little folly outweighs a lot of wisdom and honor. So Sunday, I ended with 5 things that I gleaned from an interview that I saw some years ago with John Piper. And I don't even remember the question that he was asked, but he gave 10 responses to the question. And so I remember writing down 5 of them, which really made an impact upon my life. Because in these moments when our life does not go the way we planned, as we find ourselves working through the book of Psalms, you're going to find that, especially in the life of David, where God promises David that he's going to be the king of all of Israel, but he finds himself in exile. He finds himself living in a cave and not a palace. He finds himself in all those moments. He says things like, why have you so cast down, O my soul, but put your trust in God? That in those moments when you're dealing with your emotion, your disappointment, your disillusionment of life, that I remembered these 5 things that I simply wrote down for John Piper's interview. The first is this. Let me go over them with you one more time. The first is this. Throw out comparisons in life. Hey, we're all different. We live our life comparing ourselves to someone else. I've always said that we live a lot of our lives worshiping at the altar of someone else's opinion of us. And we do. We've all been there. You'll probably be there again at some point within your life. So we throw out the comparisons because God meets us right where we are in life, not where our neighbor is. God meets you right exactly where you are, even in the moment of confusion, even in the moment when you don't have all the answers or life didn't turn out the way that you thought it would turn out. God meets you there. The second thing is this. He says to focus on the possibilities. Reba and I had this discussion in the car this week, that a moment of honesty of how we respond to life. And I think so many times, as I have done, that we spend 90% of our time simply trying to avoid conflict, avoid the obstacles of our life, and we spend 10% of our time trying to achieve the goals of our life. And when I remember jotting this down in my journal, what John Piper said was, reverse that. Reverse that and spend 10% of your time trying to avoid obstacles, because truly, energy and vision doesn't come through a life of avoidance, but it comes through a life which is focused on goals. And spend 90% of your time focused on the goals that God has given you in life. The third is this. Be aware of your seasons. That life is about seasons. Now that I have lived, 62 years, that I have finally learned this lesson. It's taken a long time, but I've learned that things will change in life. That our life is like a book. Yes, it is made up of chapters, some chapters longer than the others, for sure. But yet, trust God in the middle of the chapter that you are in your life and deal with those events and moments now, because things will change. Life will change. It will. So trust God in the middle of the chapter of your life. And then the fourth is this, and I love this one, kill half-heartedness. And I believe that do what you do with all of your heart and with all of your might and all of your strength. In fact, in the book of Proverbs, Solomon says that we are to, he says that we are to, whatever we find our hand at doing, we should do it with all of our might. And I actually think that's in the book of Ecclesiastes, but he wrote both of them, so it's his words for us. And so that whatever, if it's worth doing, you do it with all of your might, is what he's saying. That you kill half-heartedness within your life is what we should do. I shared a quote from John Edwards Sunday morning. I want to share it to you real quick as we tie this all up. Resolved to live with all my might while I do live is what he says. And the fifth is this. Confront the difficult task in your life with joy. Even those things that you are not naturally inclined to do, that you do them cheerfully. You do them cheerfully. Man, if there's anything I've learned over the years, is that life is a mixture of the things that I love and the things doing and the things that I don't necessarily love doing. Life is a mixture of the things that I'm naturally inclined to do and the things that, I'm not so inclined to do. And so how I approach these moments in my life where my life has not gone the way I'd planned, where things had not happened the way I thought they would happen, that I approach those things that I have to do and I must take care of with cheerfulness. Even when it's not the things that I'm the best at, that I approach them with cheerfulness. For some of you, that's an apology. For some of you, that's a moment where you have a conversation with someone that you're uncomfortable having a conversation with. For some of you, that's honesty and transparency right now in your life. For some of you, it's continuing in a job that you may not like, but you know that God has called you to be there, and maybe it's to simply speak his love in another person's life. So I encourage you today, in these moments when you're not a plan in life, as we find ourselves venturing into the book of Psalms together, that you remember these 5 ways to approach life and to understand that you will question God at moments in your life. That's going to happen. But never just, I think, take those moments as being, having no effect on your life. They do. Trust God today in the things and in the moments and the minutes of your life that you didn't plan, but yet God is working there so powerfully. Hey, look forward to seeing you Sunday as we talk from the book of Job together, and also as we start this series through the book of Psalms. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.